right, so get this. Have you heard about the Super Bowl logo theory?
Oh, yeah, I've seen that floating around.
It's like this whole thing where people think the NFL is kind of hinting at who's going to be in the Super Bowl just by the colors they use in the logo.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, right? Like they're dropping these subtle hints about who they're hoping will make it to the big game or something.
And the crazy part is it's been kind of accurate lately.
For sure. I mean, look at Super Bowl 56 with the Rams and the
Yeah,
Bengals.
that logo was all orange and yellow, and guess what?
Bam, they're battling it out on the
The
field.
Bengals were like total underdogs that year.
Yeah, nobody really saw them coming.
Then you have this guy, NFL Mike's Corner, on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, I think I've seen some of his stuff.
He's saying he found a connection between the logo colors and the Super Bowl teams.
Really? Like, how often are we talking?
54 out of 58 Super Bowls,
Wow, that's pretty specific.
except for when the Raiders were in it.
Right, because they don't really have a color.
So is this like statistically significant, or is it just a coincidence?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
How much of this is like actual scripting and how much of it is just chance?
When you say scripting, are you talking about, like, the NFL literally choosing the winners before the games even happen?
That's one way to look at it.
I mean, that's kind of a hard one to swallow.
Yeah, like are they rigging the whole season?
Right, think about all the moving parts, all the people involved.
Yeah, how could they keep a secret that big?
Exactly, and you'd think if it were true, somebody would have spilled the beans by now.
But then you have all these logo predictions coming true. It's like, how do you explain that?
Well, there's another possibility. Maybe it's not so much about scripting as it is about psychological priming.
Psychological priming.
Yeah, basically the idea is that by seeing those colors all season long, it kind of subconsciously makes fans think certain teams are more likely to make it to the Super Bowl.
Like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Exactly. They're being primed without even realizing it.
So we have scripting, which seems pretty far out there, and then we have this idea of psychological priming, which is a little more subtle.
Right, but both are pretty intriguing to consider.
So which one do you think is more likely?
It's tough to say for sure without some solid proof. Scripting a whole season would be insanely complicated.
Yeah, and risky as hell.
Exactly. You'd have to keep so many people quiet.
And what about the players, the coaches?
Right. You'd think someone would have spoken up if something fishy was going on.
But on the other hand, you have this logo thing that keeps proving accurate. It's hard to just dismiss it.
It definitely makes you think.
So is it possible that the NFL is using this psychological priming to kind of shape how we see the season and maybe even influence the outcome indirectly?
It's an interesting theory for sure, and it kind of makes sense from a business perspective.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, if the NFL could subtly steer the narrative towards a Super Bowl matchup that's going to get people talking.
And spending money.
Right, more viewership, more merchandise sales, it's all connected.
Exactly, and that's why this whole theory has gained so much traction. It taps into this idea that maybe things aren't as straightforward as they seem.
Like there's this whole behind-the-scenes game being played.
Right, and we're all just pawns in their elaborate scheme.
Okay, so we've got the rig theory, which feels a bit far-fetched, and then we've got the psychological priming theory, which is a little more nuanced.
Right, but what if it's none of that?
You mean, what if it's all just one giant coincidence?
Exactly. I mean, it's possible, right?
Yeah, I guess anything's possible.
But then you look at how often this logo theory has been right, especially lately. It's hard to just ignore that.
I know, it's like, what are the odds?
And there's this YouTuber, TPS, who's been doing some deep dives into this whole thing.
Oh yeah, I've heard of them.
They're arguing that this logo theory being right so often might not be a coincidence at all.
So what are they saying?
Well, they've been looking at certain games and they've noticed some questionable calls by the referees that seem to benefit the teams whose colors are in the Super Bowl logo.
Wait, so are they saying the refs are in on it too?
Well, they're not explicitly saying that, but they're definitely raising some eyebrows.
I mean, some of those calls were pretty controversial.
Yeah, and when you start connecting the dots, it makes you wonder if the NFL might have a reason to make sure certain teams make it to the Super Bowl.
That's a pretty big accusation.
It is, but it's definitely something to think about.
So what do you think? Is there a connection between this logo theory and how the refs are calling the games?
It's a compelling argument, I'll give them that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we can just dismiss it outright.
Definitely not. We need to look at the data, analyze those calls, and see if there's really a pattern there.
All right, so we're diving deeper into this rabbit hole.
Buckle up. It's about to get interesting.
Okay, so we've got some interesting coincidences, some potential theories, but let's get into specifics like Super Bowl 56 with the Bengals and the Rams.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one for the logo theory, folks.
Right, that logo was all orange and yellow. Pretty clear cut, right?
Well, the yellow definitely fits the Rams, but it's not really a Bengals color.
True, but their helmets do have that little bit of yellow, right?
Yeah, a tiny bit. But what's really interesting about that Super Bowl is that the Bengals were such huge underdogs.
Yeah, nobody expected them to go that far.
And yet there they were, matching the logo, perfectly defying all the odds.
It's pretty wild when you think about it. And then you've got Super Bowl 57, the Eagles and the Chiefs.
Red and green, just like the logo.
That one seems pretty straightforward.
Well, TPS actually pointed out that there's another team whose colors could fit that logo too.
Oh, right, the Commanders.
Yeah, they're burgundy and bold.
Yeah, I guess you could see that as red and green, especially if you think of the gold as kind of a yellowish green.
Exactly. And if you factor in TPS's observations about the officiating,
You mean those calls that seem to benefit the Eagles over the Commanders in the NFC Championship game?
right, some of those calls were pretty questionable.
Especially that one where the Commanders were almost penalized with an automatic touchdown because of all those encroachment penalties.
Yeah, that was a tough one to swallow.
Makes you wonder if the NFL really wanted to see the Eagles in that Super Bowl.
If they wanted a Chiefs-Eagles matchup, they needed to make sure the Eagles got there.
So are we saying the refs are in on it too?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but it definitely raises some questions.
It's a pretty crazy thought, isn't it? Like, the outcome of a game could be influenced by something as simple as a logo.
It is a bit unsettling.
So if we're going by this logic, does that mean the Chiefs are a lock for this year's Super Bowl too?
Well, their red definitely matches the Super Bowl LX logo.
And that burgundy could be the Commanders?
Exactly. Tyler Sports seems pretty convinced that's the matchup we're going to see.
It would fit the whole underdog narrative thing too.
Yeah, the Commanders, like the Bengals, are on a redemption arc.
They've had a rough few seasons, but they're looking pretty strong now.
Imagine a Commanders-Chiefs Super Bowl with the Commanders pulling off the upset.
Oh man, that would be huge.
A total ratings bonanza for the NFL.
I mean, if you're trying to craft a season for maximum drama and viewership.
That would be the ultimate storyline.
But hold on, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Right, we're still in speculation territory.
We can analyze the colors and look for patterns, but we don't actually know what's going to happen.
We have no concrete proof that the NFL is choosing Super Bowl teams based on the logo.
It's all just a
A
theory.
very intriguing theory.
So where does that leave us? Are we buying into this logo theory or not?
I think it's more about acknowledging that there might be more going on than we realize.
Like, what do you mean?
Well, the NFL is a business, right? And businesses are always looking for ways to make more money.
Yes, so.
So is it really that far-fetched to think that they might be using this logo as a way to subtly influence things?
You mean to guide the narrative towards a more profitable Super Bowl matchup?
Exactly. They're not rigging the games necessarily.
But they're kind of nudging things in a certain direction.
Shaping the narrative, creating storylines that will keep fans engaged.
Even if it's all just a coincidence, it definitely adds another layer of intrigue to the season.
Makes you pay attention to the details.
So what do you think? Is it all a master plan or just a series of lucky guesses?
I guess that's for each viewer to decide. Yeah, it really is a puzzle, and that's what makes it so much fun to talk about.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Like, what does all of this mean for us as viewers?
That's the big question, right?
Should we feel manipulated? Should we just ignore it and enjoy the game? I mean, what's the takeaway here?
I think it depends on how you look at it. If you're convinced that the NFL is pulling all the strings just to make a buck, it can be kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it would kind of take the fun out of it, wouldn't it, if you felt like the whole thing was rigged?
Exactly. But on the other hand, even if they are influencing things, they're not controlling everything.
Right, the players are still out there giving it their all.
It's still a game of skill and strategy and athleticism.
And there's always that element of surprise.
Upsets happen, underdogs win. Sometimes the better team doesn't come out on top.
That's what makes sports so exciting.
Exactly. You never know what's going to happen.
So even with this logo theory hanging over everything, there's still that unpredictability.
Right. We can analyze all we want, but we can't predict the future.
We just have to watch and see what happens.
And who knows, maybe by paying attention to these patterns and these little clues, we can get a little better at predicting the outcome.
Ooh, I like that. So if we're looking ahead to this year's Super Bowl based on everything we've talked about, what should we be watching for?
Well, the Commanders are definitely a team to keep an eye on. They fit that underdog narrative that we've been talking about, and their colors match the Super Bowl LX logo.
Right, that burgundy and gold.
Exactly. See how they do against tough opponents, see if they can keep up that momentum.
And the Chiefs, of course, they're the team to beat right now.
They're always a force to be reckoned with, and their red is right there in the logo.
So we've got the Commanders, the Chiefs, and then we have to watch out for those potentially biased calls by the refs.
Right. Pay attention to those key moments. See if there are any calls that seem to swing things in a particular direction.
Like a pattern within a pattern.
Yeah, but here's something else to think about. Remember, NFL Mike's Corner.
The guy who says the logo theory has been right 54 out of 58 times.
Right, and the only times it didn't work out was when the Raiders were in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, because they don't really have a color, so they're like the wild card.
What if the NFL is using the logo to mislead us?
You mean like a fake out?
Exactly. What if they're making us think it's going to be the Commanders and the Chiefs, but they actually have something else planned entirely?
Whoa, that's a crazy thought, but it would be brilliant.
It would be the ultimate misdirection.
So we shouldn't just focus on the teams whose colors match the logo.
Right. We should be looking for the team that nobody expects, the team that would blow this whole theory wide open.
The dark horse, the Cinderella story.
Exactly. The team that would make us all question everything we thought we knew about the Super Bowl logo.
Man, this just keeps getting deeper and deeper.
So keep your eyes peeled. watch for those subtle hints and don't be afraid to think outside the box.
The truth might be even more complicated than we thought.
And, most importantly, enjoy the games.
Yeah, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
The athleticism, the competition, the drama.
Whether it's all planned out or just a series of lucky coincidences, it's going to be an exciting season.
Can't wait to see how it all unfolds.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Super Bowl logo theory.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep those theories coming.